Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that just dropped, and honestly, it's one of the biggest updates yet for Jump Space, the new vendor update, which also comes with a full-on Halloween event. There's a lot to unpack here, from new melee combat mechanics to some fresh handcrafted sectors, and a couple of cool surprises that make the game feel way more alive than before. So let's get into everything that's new, what's changed, and whether this update actually improves the game's flow and replayability, or just adds more layers to what's already there. So first things first, if you've been playing Jump Space since launch, you already know that the devs have been super active with updates. They dropped several hotfixes earlier this month to smooth out bugs, improve performance, and fix a few mission issues that were frustrating people. But this update isn't just a patch, it's a real content expansion. It's called the Vendor Update, and it brings with it a bunch of quality of life changes, gameplay additions, and even a Halloween-themed event that adds some personality and flavor to the world. Let's start with the biggest addition, melee weapons. Yes, melee combat has finally arrived in Jump Space, and honestly, it changes the way the game feels in close quarters fights. Up until now, most of your engagements were about gunplay and positioning, lots of running, ducking behind cover, and taking shots from a distance. Now, with melee weapons like the crowbar and the wrench, there's a new sense of weight and strategy when enemies close in. You can block and even deflect attacks, which gives you a lot more control when things get tight. It's not just about smashing stuff either. The devs built in a block mechanic that actually works with timing, so you can parry hits if you get it just right. That adds a little skill layer to it instead of just mashing buttons. It makes combat feel more tactile, and that's something the community has been asking for since early access started. Now, one of the coolest things about this update is the introduction of vendors. You've got two main characters to meet in the hangar, Vosk and Bozzy. Vosk is your artifact guy, and Bozzy is your weapons and gear dealer. Vosk sells these temporary upgrades called artifacts that completely change your approach to a mission. Think of them like mini buffs or experimental gear that gives you a little edge for your next run. You can choose what kind of advantage you want depending on the type of mission you're about to take on. Bozzy, on the other hand, focuses more on weapons and physical gear. So if you've been wanting to tweak your loadout or try something new, he's your guy. Having these vendors gives the game world a more lived-in feel. It's not just about running missions anymore. There's now a reason to spend time in the hangar, strategize, and plan your next outing. Speaking of outings, the update also adds 8 brand new handcrafted missions. And these aren't just recycled environments. They've got new objectives, layouts, and even some distinct themes. One mission might have you exploring a desert outpost under a scorching sky, while another might throw you into a chaotic space station with a massive ring structure to defend. It's cool because each new area feels designed with purpose rather than just another procedurally generated sector. The devs clearly wanted to make every mission feel memorable, with little touches that stand out like lighting changes, atmospheric sound tweaks, and even how enemies spawn and behave depending on the modifier you're playing under. Ah, yes, modifiers. Another important piece of this update. The game now features new sector modifiers like Ion Rift, High Legion Presence, and Materia Disruption. Each one changes how a mission plays out, forcing you to adapt your strategy on the fly. For example, an Ion Rift might mess with your energy systems or shield recovery, making things much harder if you're used to relying on your usual gadgets. High Legion Presence means more enemies, and not just more in number, but often tougher variants or smarter placement. It keeps the challenge level unpredictable, which is something that was missing in earlier builds where missions could start to feel repetitive after a while. These modifiers make every run feel a little bit different, even if you've already plat mapped before. Now, since this update landed around Halloween, the devs decided to throw in a little seasonal event too, which is actually pretty fun. Bozzy, the weapons vendor I mentioned earlier, needs your help collecting pumpkins, and if you manage to get them all, you unlock a special jack-o'-lantern cosmetic item. It's a lighthearted side activity, but it's a nice touch that shows the developers are trying to make Jump Space feel more like a living game world rather than just a mission-based shooter. Plus, it's always fun when games do little limited time events like this. It gives players a reason to jump back in, even if it's just to see what's new. Now, let's talk about stability and polish, because that's something players have been vocal about since launch. Before this update, the devs rolled out multiple hotfixes, including one big one at the start of October that addressed a bunch of annoying bugs. Things like mission soft locks, progression hiccups, and even some visual issues that made the UI flicker. From what I've played since the vendor update dropped, the game runs smoother now, with fewer stutters and much faster load times between missions. That's a big deal for anyone who plays on console or a mid-range PC, because the early version could feel a little rough around the edges. This patch doesn't just add content, it actually makes the experience more stable and enjoyable. There's also a small addition called the Supporter Upgrade, which is basically a paid DLC for people who want to support the developers directly. It's purely cosmetic. It comes with a special suit and 3 helmets, but no gameplay advantage whatsoever. I know some people roll their eyes at that kind of DLC, but in this case, I actually think it's a nice gesture. Jump Space is still in early access, and the devs have been transparent about using optional purchases to fund further development. So if you like what they're doing, this is a simple way to back them without breaking the balance of the game. Now, I want to talk about the general feel of the game after this update, because this is where things get interesting. The pacing feels more refined now. Before, missions could sometimes feel disconnected. You'd finish one, head back to base, maybe swap weapons, and that was it. But now, with vendors, new missions, and artifacts, there's a stronger sense of progression and continuity. You're not just repeating missions, you're preparing for them, upgrading strategically, and then testing out new builds in the field. It adds a loop that feels satisfying, something that was missing before. The new melee system also changes your playstyle more than I expected. I found myself experimenting with close-range builds that focus on mobility and blocking, instead of long-range sniping. That flexibility gives Jump Space a kind of depth it didn't quite have at launch. The devs clearly understand what makes a game like this work. They're listening to player feedback and adding things that enhance replayability rather than just padding out the experience. The 8 new handcrafted missions are proof of that. You can tell they've taken time to design them around different combat styles. Some encourage long-range tactics, while others force you into close-quarter situations where the new melee mechanics really shine. It feels like they're trying to make sure every player can find a rhythm that fits their preferred style. And then, of course, you've got those sector modifiers I mentioned earlier. They really do make a difference, especially when combined with artifacts. Let's say you're running a mission with the Ion Rift modifier active. You might pick an artifact that boosts shield regeneration or improves your melee block timing. That kind of synergy gives every mission a bit of strategy, making it more than just shoot everything that moves. It turns Jump Space into a game where preparation actually matters, and that's something fans of roguelike or tactical shooters will definitely appreciate. As for the Halloween event, it's not some huge expansion, but it's a fun addition. You can tell it's meant to lighten the mood and give players something seasonal to enjoy. Plus, Bozzy's Pumpkin Hunt has a bit of personality, it's quirky, it fits the vibe, and it makes the hangar feel more alive when you return between missions. The cosmetic reward isn't game-changing, but it's unique enough that you'll probably want it just to stand out. Now, I know some people are wondering if this update changes the game enough to bring back players who may have stepped away after launch. Honestly, yeah, it's worth coming back for. The vendor update makes Jump Space feel more complete. It's still an early access title, but now it feels like a real evolving experience rather than a work in progress. The combination of melee combat, new mission variety, and the addition of vendors adds layers of depth and progression that make replaying the game more rewarding. And I have to say, the devs deserve credit for their communication. They've been active in the community, posting updates, listening to player feedback, and being transparent about what's coming next. That's something we don't see often enough in early access games, and it makes a huge difference in how the player base perceives the project. The fact that they're pushing these updates steadily, each one adding meaningful content, shows they're serious about making Jump Space a long-term experience.